I'm Taylor from a peer financial coach with the Financial Wellness Center, and I'll hand it over to you, Kelly.
My name is Kelly Mason, and I am one of your Pathway Oregon advisors. Well, a new advisor, so you might not recognize me. I just joined the team about a month and a half ago. Actually, I was a financial aid counselor directly before this, so I'm super excited.
I'm super happy to be here with you guys today doing this. While we had you guys wait, there were some questions on the screen. Kelly, if you can go to the next slide, it'll show you guys the correct answers. I'll give you guys a few seconds to look it over just in case you guys were curious what the correct answers are. Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. So this is the beginning of the presentation about planning for life after graduation. I know you guys are here for Pathway. Most of you guys here are Pathway students and you guys are going to be graduating. So that's really exciting. Hopefully the information you guys learned today will help you after graduation. So at the Financial Wellness Center, we're fostering a community of financially capable ducks at the University of Oregon. And our mission is to financially empower students with the knowledge needed to make sound financial decisions during and after college. We're at a time in our lives where we're learning to be independent or already are, so learning the basics of finance is definitely super important. Here's the big five, which are the critical areas of holistic financial wellness. We have earning, which includes budgeting, spending, which consists of managing the inflow and outflow of money, borrowing, that includes student loans, understanding credit and credit cards, protecting, which includes identity theft and fraud, and last but not least, saving and investing, which touches on saving strategies and investing 101. So, one way we reach students is through on demand financial education workshops that include student groups and organizations. We also have one on one virtual peer financial coaching, which you can sign up for at financialwellness.uoregon.edu. And lastly, we build partnerships across campus offering financial wellness enrichment opportunities to students. So this is the official start of our presentation. During this time, you guys will learn the keys to financial success post-grad. Some important topics you'll need to learn are budgeting, understanding credit, and loan repayment, but today we're only focusing on budgeting and loan repayment. The Financial Wellness Center website actually has a lot of resources on understanding credit, so I would be sure to check that out afterwards. So we're going to first start with budgeting 101. Budgeting is the actual foundation of financial wellness. Like every topic about finance starts with budgeting, no matter what it is, and some of the budgeting information that we'll be going over is provided by the National Endowment for Financial Education. So here's a quote by Dave Ramsey, which says, "Earning a lot of money is not the key to prosperity, how you handle it is." I think this quote perfectly encompasses what budgeting is. Budgeting means spending money wisely. And this also relates to the question, does income reflect wealth? And the answer is income is different from wealth because income is how much you're earning, but wealth is dependent on what you have and save. So essentially, it's important to budget and to spend your money wisely because while you might have a lot of money, if you're spending all of it recklessly and not saving and accumulating wealth, then it really doesn't matter that you make a lot of money. A person that makes 50,000 a year can have more wealth than a person who makes 80,000 a year if they're managing their money right. So the key topics we'll be going over for budgeting are tracking spending, fixed versus variable expenses, and steps to budgeting. For tracking your spending, you'll first want to record all your purchases for a week. Then after you've done that, try to repeat for 3 more weeks, which makes a month total. A couple of ways to do that is by using an expense app such as Mint, NerdWallet, or the Memo app on your phone. You can also use a small spiral notebook or even an envelope for receipts. You could pick whichever way works for you and will make you most likely to track your spending because, everyone has their own preferences. Fixed expenses are expenses that don't change. They are fixed and will always be the same. Some examples are housing and rent, car insurance, your cell phone bill, loan payments, and health insurance. On the other hand, variable expenses are expenses that vary and can change depending on if you want them to. Some examples are gas or transportation, food, entertainment, gifts for friends or family, and vacations and any traveling. And what you want to do is to get your variable expenses changed to fixed so that you set spending. in order to do that, you want to set spending caps so that you'll actually stick to them. So perhaps for vacations and traveling, don't always try to go out of state every month or go out of town every weekend. And for food, it can be cheaper to buy groceries and eat in than go out to restaurants that have varying prices. And then you should also try prioritizing plans when it comes to entertainment or going out. When you start working after college, you'll probably befriend some of your coworkers that enjoy going out to happy hour, but do you really need to go to happy hour last minute at Topgolf on a regular Wednesday night? Most likely not. So, by having a limit and telling yourself no, you'll save a lot of money. So, for step one of creating a budget, you want to identify your monthly income, which can include earnings from your job, any available savings, and potentially a side hustle, maybe. Nowadays, people are getting pretty creative. So, if you have your own business making jewelry and selling it on Etsy, that definitely counts. Or maybe you might be a TikTok star on the side, making some money from that. You just want to identify any money that you're receiving. Next, you'll want to compare your income and expenses. If you find that you have money left over at the end of the month, you should pay yourself and put it into your savings. And maybe once a month, you can treat yourself to a coffee or something reasonable. If you find that you have more expenses than money, you definitely need to get back on track and fix your budget. It's important to set those limits and to make sure to stick to them. So there are definitely some ways that you can save money, for instance, buy groceries and cook at home instead of eating out every day or week. Meal prepping is always great if you use time as an excuse and say you can't cook every day. You can also rent with roommates so your rent isn't as high, or if you can live at home with your parents, that would be a good alternative too because you'll already have things you need there such as plates, bowls, silverware, furniture, things you'll have to spend money on if you do move out. And last but not least, vacations. I know some of us want to have a hot girl summer or a hot boy summer or just a hot summer in general. And that might mean wanting to travel out of the country or the state. Well, if you need a sign to tell you not to book an unexpected trip, I'm that sign for you. Don't do it. Sometimes driving to the beach or Seattle is a better choice, or, if you really want to travel, budget for now and save. This will require putting in a little extra work to save minimally or majorly, but it adds up big time and ends up saving you a lot of money that you didn't have, or now you have more money to spend a little more on coffee and invest in your savings for the future. So here's an overview of how to budget. First, you identify your monthly income. Next, you compare your income and expenses. And afterwards, you should anticipate fixed and variable expenses. And lastly, if you have extra money left over, it would definitely be smart to put them into your savings. So, if you're not convinced yet why you should budget, here's some reasons as to why it's important. It can set you up for financial success. You'll have money to pay bills. It'll help you accomplish more without having a financial burden. It'll also help you create healthy spending and saving habits to improve your financial wellness. It can help establish a good credit history, which helps you save money. And there's much more that's not listed here. And now I'll hand it over to Kelly to go over the basics of student loans since she's going through this process right now. So she'll definitely be very helpful.
Thank you, Taylor. All right, guys. So I know that student loans are not super fun. And I'm not even sure if you guys borrowed loans, but I think this information is super helpful. And thanks, Taylor, for that great overview on budgeting. I know that, so I was a Pathway student too, and I graduated in 2017. And now everything's kind of come full circle, and I work for the Pathway team, which is really exciting. But I know something that I struggled with right after graduation was, okay, I don't have my student loans anymore. I'm not getting these disbursements. Like, how do I pay my bills? And it really took some adjustment on how I spend money, when I spend money, and like tracking when I get my paychecks and kind of keeping track of those things. Because when you get a loan disbursement in a big chunk a couple times a year, that's a little bit different than a paycheck. So I really wanted to make sure that we go over that with you guys because I know that was a big adjustment for me. But moving right along into student loans, I'll try to keep this as upbeat as possible because I know that this is not the most fun topic. But some things to think about as we move into this portion of the presentation are the different types of loans, how you can pay your loans back. And obviously, we've been struggling with COVID and everything that comes along with it for the past year and a half or so now. But the loan forgiveness, not forgiveness, but some of the less restricting policies around student loans that have kind of helped during COVID, we'll go over a little bit too, and then definitely some tips for you to wrap us up. The number one thing to know, and that was my saving grace all throughout undergrad to keep me from having too much anxiety about this, is that you don't have to make payments on your student loans while you're in school. As long as you're enrolled at least half time, you really don't have to worry about it unless you want to make payments. And we can talk a little bit about that later. But number one thing, payments are deferred. Deferred means you don't have to pay until 6 months after graduation. And so that 6-month period after you finish school is called your grace period. One thing I learned the hard way with that is that you only get one grace period. So I finished undergrad, used my grace period. Now I'm in grad school. And if I take time off, I don't get another grace period. So that's something to keep in mind. Once you use it, you lose it. So once that period's over, you begin to make mandatory payments. And so there's a couple different types of student loans you may be familiar with if you're borrowing them. The most popular are the subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Chances are you see those on your aid offer every single year. And they're very similar in that they have the same interest rate. You don't have to make payments on them while you're in school. They both have that 6-month grace period. The difference between the two is that subsidized loans do not accrue interest while you're in school. The unsubsidized loan will accrue interest. Right now, the interest rate is 2.75%. But the key thing to remember here right now is that because of COVID, and this is on another slide, none of your student loans are accruing interest at this time. So another loan type is the Grad Plus or the Parent Plus loan. Maybe your parents have helped you pay for school by borrowing the Parent Plus loan. Very similar, but the big difference is who's the borrower? Your parents. So the borrower's parents are responsible to pay that one back. That sometimes is a little bit confusing, like when you're an incoming freshman trying to kind of wrap your head around the aid offer. But that one has a little bit higher interest rate. I believe it's at 5.3% right now. But parents also don't have to make payments while you're in school. They get that 6-month grace period after you graduate and all that good stuff. And then the last one I'll just talk about really briefly is the Perkins loan. That loan actually no longer exists. Well, that program doesn't exist anymore. We're not offering new Perkins loans. But because if you're a senior, then you may have this loan only from your freshman year, because that 17-18 school year was the last year that this loan was offered. But it's very similar in that you don't have to make payments while you're in school. That loan actually has a 9-month grace period. And I guess the only other thing I'd want to say about that one is that it has a different loan servicer. So Perkins is serviced through ECSI, whereas your subsidized and unsubsidized or the Parent Plus or Grad Plus would be serviced through one of the other federal loan servicers. And then you see the little point at the bottom that your grace period begins at any point in which you're not enrolled at least half time. But if you're a Pathway student, usually you should be enrolled full time throughout the regular school year, and summer doesn't really count. Okay, so how can you prepare for loan repayment as you're finishing up school once you're graduating? So the first step, and it might be good to do this now just so that you're not scrambling when it comes time to pay your loans, is to figure out who your loan servicer is. It's really easy to do that on studentaid.gov. And you can just log in and do that. The financial aid office is usually really happy to help you walk through that process as well. But once you figure out who your loan servicer is, so some of the most popular or like the main ones are Nelnet, Navient, FedLoan, Great Lakes. You may recognize those names. One of those is probably your federal loan servicer, and you can find out who they are and then create an account with them. It's really easy to register on their website. And that's what I did, like my final spring term of senior year. I just found out who my servicer was. That was Great Lakes for me. I created a login on their website. And that way, when it came time to get documents, tax documents, or make payments, I already had a login and I didn't have to stress about figuring all that out. Next is to determine how much you owe. all of the federal loan servicers, their websites are pretty user-friendly. And right when you log in, it has this pie chart showing how much you owe, how much interest has accrued. And so you can use that. And you can also look up how much you owe on DuckWeb, on studentaid.gov, on NSLDS, which is the National Student Loan Data System. There's a lot of different places to find this information. And then the third step to prepare is estimating out your monthly payments. And that's really going to depend on a couple different things. And we'll talk about the repayment options here in a second. And then last but not least, completing exit counseling. If you remember, the first time you borrowed your loans, you did an exercise called entrance counseling. And that was a little reading and answering questions about what it means to borrow money for the first time. And so the ending version of that is exit counseling. And it kind of says, okay, you know, you're graduating, congratulations, here's what's coming next. And so you'll want to make sure to get that done, as that is a requirement. Most of this, if not all of this, can be completed on studentaid.gov. But like I mentioned before, when we were talking about the different loan types, the Perkins loan is serviced through ECSI. And so here you'll see the URL listed is efpls.ed.gov. And so you can look that up on Google too, Perkins. It's a little bit harder to find. So feel free to ask questions about that if you were a student that borrowed that loan, but it might not apply to you guys. Okay, so we talked about loan types. We talked about how to get prepared for repayment. Now I'm just going to go over some of the different repayment options for you guys. I think that during my time as a financial aid counselor and even a student worker in the financial aid office, what really gave people anxiety, because the media portrays this in a certain way and you kind of have these preconceived ideas, but there's so many different options for repayment, and your loan servicer is always going to be willing to work with you to find the right one for you. It's not like you're stuck. So the most common is the standard repayment plan. It's a fixed payment amount over a 10-year payment period. That's considered the standard. That's what you would automatically be placed in if you don't choose or elect a different repayment program. And if you do the standard, it would guarantee, if you made all on-time payments for 10 years, that your loans would be paid off in those 10 years. It basically divides the total that you borrowed across 10 years of monthly payments, which ends up being 120 payments. There's a graduated plan, which is similar, but you start off making lower payments and you end up making larger payments over time. I don't normally recommend this widely unless you think you're going to be in a career where you'll end up earning a larger income over time. I mean, that's the goal, right? Getting a degree, earning more income over time, of course. But you kind of get stuck with these larger payments over time. And so you want to make sure that you're on a career path that would allow you to do that safely and efficiently. There's also the extended repayment plan, which is also similar to these other ones I'm talking about, but you have to have borrowed at least 30K. And it extends the payment plan over 25 years. So I talked about the standard payment plan being 10 years, the graduated's 10 years. Extended just means it's literally extending the time that you're paying your loans, which also you have to think about the pros and cons. With the extended repayment plan, you would end up paying more interest over time just because it's such a longer time frame. You can switch times, or you can switch repayment plans as many times as you want. I've switched my repayment plan a couple of different times, and I've only been out of school for a couple of years. So you kind of mold it to your reality. That's what I always like to say. It's moldable to your reality. It's moldable to your income and kind of where you're at in life. So it's not just like a credit card, for example, where, you know, if you owe a balance, you need to be making those payments. Student loans, they're a little bit more workable and moldable in that way. And another thing that I like to do with my loans, so all of the federal loan servicers offer this. You'll see the little point at the bottom. You can get a 0.25 interest rate reduction if you set your loan payments up on auto pay. I mean, why not, right? Set it up for a date that works for you. The first of the month, it's the first of the month, right? No, I have everything on auto pay for the first day of the month. That's why I know it's over with, and you get that 0.25 interest rate reduction. So we talked about some of the standard repayment plans. Now I'm going to talk about income-driven repayment, or IDR. That's actually the repayment option that I use. And it's based on how much you earn. Your minimum payment amount is based on your income. Makes sense, right? The thing to remember with these repayment options are it can result in you making payments for longer than 10 years. It can result in you paying more interest over time, but it allows you to have a payment that's doable for you and for your budget, like we talked about budgeting earlier in this workshop. Okay, so there's a couple different ones, and I'm not going to go too much into the weeds because they're very similar. And really what happens if you indicate, so when you go on studentaid.gov and you find your loans officer and you apply, you select your repayment plan. If you choose that you'd like to be placed into IDR, income driven repayment, your servicer, you can elect that your servicer places you into the most beneficial plan based on the income information that you submit. So they ask you to submit your most recently filed tax return, or if you haven't filed taxes, they'll ask you to submit your most recent pay stubs or some official document showing how much money you earn, because that's how they determine your payments. And so all these definitely will apply to you. You have to be a borrower after 2007. You guys are students beyond that time. So these would definitely work out for you. But the key thing is it's 10% of discretionary income, and how they determine that is based on the income statements that you provide. I know that if you're married, they're going to ask for both you and your spouse's income. So that's something to consider. If you borrowed a lot of loans, I know this is like, oh man, I'm not here to tell you when to get married or not, but it's something to consider if you have large loan payments or your potential spouse has large loan payments and you'd like to use the IDR. If you're married, you do have to include your spouse's tax information. So as you can see, these income-driven repayment plans, they just keep coming. So there was the payee, the repayee, the IBR, the ICR, and really it kind of just depends where you're at. So payments are based on income and family size, IBR is based on how much you borrowed. And that's where these ones are, these two on this slide are based on how much you borrowed total. And you can see that instead of 10%, IBR is 15% of discretionary income, and then the ICR is 20% of discretionary income. So as your debt amount increases, I'm under the impression that the portion that you have to pay increases a little bit. And so another reason why I'm on IDR, and I'd be curious if you guys want to share in the chat what your majors are and what fields you might be interested in going in. I just thought of this question on the fly, but it'd be fun if you'd be willing to share in the chat what your majors are. So I double majored in Spanish and 3 p.m. How I became a financial aid counselor and now an academic advisor out of that, I'm not exactly sure. That just goes to show that you don't necessarily have to stay in the field of your major. And that's a whole nother conversation. But so the University of Oregon is technically an employer that will qualify for what's called public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. That's a super hot topic right now. Loan forgiveness in general. You may have seen some buzz about that in the last election cycle. I know I did, and that would be super cool. But for now, I'm working towards PSLF. And what that means is, and I think that's on another slide, but these repayment plans, the IDR plans, if you make 120 payments on time, and if you do that, basically the PSLF agreement is that any amount you owe after that you haven't paid off, the government will forgive for you. So your federal student loans would be forgiven after that point. Okay, so this is another topic that I actually recently learned more about. And you guys can let me know if I'm like talking too fast, but loan consolidation. I always thought, oh no, don't consolidate your loans. But I'll be honest, I actually just consolidated my federal student loans, and there's pros and cons to consolidation, and it's definitely something that you'll have to think about for yourself. But basically, it's the process in which you combine all of your federal student loans into one loan with one monthly payment. So I was a student who had subsidized, unsubsidized, and that Perkins loan I was talking about. And that was just a couple different monthly payments. I had a couple different loan servicers. It was starting to get a little bit confusing to me. And it honestly was anxiety inducing a little bit. And the Perkins loan, because it was separate, it didn't qualify for the income driven repayment, and it didn't qualify for the public service loan forgiveness. And so those are some benefits to consolidation. I was able to consolidate the Perkins loan and the unsub and the sub and just make it all one big loan with one monthly payment with one loan servicer at one interest rate. That being said, this is where there could be a con. The interest rate that's offered to you based on consolidation is a weighted average of the loans that you're consolidating. So they take an average, which is, you add up all your interest rates and you divide it by the number of interest rates you have, right? That's what average is. Math refresher. No, but so some of my interest rates were like 3%, some of them were like 4%, and I ended up with like a 4.1% interest rate at the end of the day. So it did raise my interest rate on some of my older loans, but I actually reduced it on some of them. And you guys feel free, there's only 2 of you in this presentation, so feel free to unmute if you have questions about that, or we can have some time for questions at the end. But
I had a little question.
yeah,
You said that you were able to consolidate the Perkins loan. I have the Perkins loan.
okay.
Once you did that, were you able to do the IDR repayment plan?
Yes. So I was able to include, because I was having to make 2 separate monthly payments, right? Because they're 2 different loan servicers. So I was able to include my Perkins loan in my one consolidation loan, and they calculated my monthly payment based on my new total loan amount. So it looked like, I obviously it included that, which means that the total amount borrowed was a bigger number, which based on my income made my payment amount lower. So for me, that was beneficial. Does that make sense?
It does. And what is the consolidation through the loan servicer that you use, or is it someone else?
Yeah, great question. So loan consolidation, you are assigned automatically to the loan servicer Fed loan. You don't get to choose your loan servicer. Well, actually, I think if you want to do PSLF, if you do consolidation, you actually do get to choose your loan servicer. But because I was working towards PSLF, you have to have Fed loan as your loan servicer. So I transitioned from having Great Lakes and ECSI to just Fed loan, but you get to choose.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It'll ask you on studentaid.gov who you want your loan servicer to be.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, great questions. That was awesome. So the possible benefits, I might have already touched on these a little bit, but the single monthly payment, that was a pro for me. You have a car note, you got a cell phone bill, you have rent, you have credit cards, all of these things, and having multiple loan payments, just consolidating it all to one works for me. But I want to give the disclaimer that this isn't for everybody, because there's a fixed interest rate that will never change. That's the same with all of your federal loans, but it will be a new rate. It does offer the expanded repayment options, which we talked about, and it could result in lower payments. So typically, this is achieved by extending your repayment period, which can happen with the income-driven repayment, which could mean you're paying more overall. And that's where PSLF kind of comes in. And so, yeah, I could go on and on about loan consolidation, but we'll stop there for now. We already talked a little bit about forgiveness and the public service PSLF, but here are some of the qualifying requirements to enroll in PSLF. You have to be employed full-time at a public service job. Public service jobs include government, education, nonprofits, things of that nature. And you can find out if your potential employer, once you graduate, is eligible for public service once you actually get hired or find that job. And if they are, you should definitely take advantage of this. 2, you need to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. So it's actually required that you enroll in IDR. And then 3, you have to have qualifying direct loans. Remember, I said Perkins loan was not included. So I said, oh no, I'm gonna consolidate and include that loan and get that one forgiven too. So there's kind of a loophole around that with consolidation. And then 4, you have to make 120 on-time payments. So that's the key, is you have to still make 10 years worth of payments. But if you're on an IDR, the idea is the government would be able to forgive the rest for you. So the remaining balance you owe after those 120 payments would be forgiven, which is great. And once you are employed, hopefully a qualifying employer, you have to complete a PSLF certification and an application. I redo it every year just in case. This is a government entity. So, and because I switched loan servicers, I just do it once a year just to have my ducks in a row. Had to add that pun in there, but yeah, and you can find more information on studentaid.gov. I'm going to keep repeating studentaid.gov for you a lot. That's the main website where you'll find a lot of this information. But if you see at the bottom there, it says or FedLoan, myfedloan.org. That's because that's the only servicer that you can have for PSLF. So now we can move. We talked about the loan types and the repayment options. Now we can talk about some more information that's with the times. CARES Act effect on loans. COVID. So what COVID and the CARES Act effect on loans has been a couple of different things. And it's actually been to a lot of people's benefit and been a really big stress relief. So the suspension of loan payments. The federal government is not requiring that you make payments on any of your student loans until I believe September 30th of this year. And this has been for over the past year now, no payments required. So this is a great time to make payments because they're also not accruing interest. So you could make some really great headway on your student loans if you wanted to make payments right now, but you definitely don't have to. They also are not collecting on defaulted loans. Default, which we haven't really talked a lot about. It sounds like a scary word. Default means that your loans are not in good standing and that you haven't been making the required monthly payments. So there's delinquent, there's default, there's a couple different statuses that your loans can be in, but basically they're not collecting on defaulted loans right now. So that's exciting. It will expire eventually, and eventually we'll have to begin making our loan payments. But for now, we're not required to.
Question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you'll know this, but let's see. So I'm graduating in June.
Whoop,
And I
whoop.
think this CARES Act thing goes through September.
Right.
Will my grace period start in September or when I graduate?
Your grace period, I'm under the impression that the grace period would start when you graduate. So those two things might overlap a little bit. So you might not super benefit from this.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I would operate on the assumption that your grace period begins when you are no longer enrolled in school. And so that would mean, if my mind is serving me correctly, that your first monthly payment would probably be in January of 2022. And it wouldn't start after the September date. I don't think that's how that works. But that being said, it's something worth double checking. And that's a really good question. Thank you for that. Okay, I feel like I'm talking really fast because I felt like I had a lot of information to get through, but we're moving right along. And if we can let you guys go a little bit early, that's cool too. So here are some tips and resources for making loan payments and thinking about repaying your loans. A common myth is that if you can't make your payments, your loans are automatically going to go into default. And that's not necessarily true. If you can't make your payments after your grace period and after you graduate and you're struggling, or you lose your job, or you don't find a job, like let's say your 6-month grace period expires and you still haven't found a job, all you need to do is contact your loan servicer, give them a call. I swear you'll get right through to a real person, and they'll help you figure it out. Usually I don't wait more than 30 seconds on the phone when I call FedLoan. They're always right there to answer, and they're really good with their customer service. And so there's options like forbearance, for example, which is basically an extension of your grace period. So if you're unable to make payments, or they'll help you walk through that income-driven repayment. And if your income is zero, guess what? Your payments will be zero too. And so that's something to keep in mind. You always want to keep in contact just to make sure your loans are in good standing. So even if you aren't earning any income, you can still be in good standing making $0 payments. So that can be a little bit confusing. So make sure to ask questions if you have them about that. Another tip, be cautious of phone calls, emails, letters, texts. things like that, offering loan relief and to avoid scams. I know that seems like common sense, but I even saw this on the news on Good Morning America yesterday that I think Americans have been scammed out of over $2 million in the past year or so. And that's just crazy to me. But these scammers are getting good, guys. So we gotta stay alert. We gotta be aware. And what I always look for is if I'm getting some kind of communication from my loan servicer, they will always have their logo. So their logo and it I've gotten actually fake emails from Fed Loan before and it didn't have the logo on it. So that's something to look for. But you can always give them a call and ask, hey, did you guys send me this in the mail or did you send out a text? Or usually they're not going to text you, but that you usually get paper mail or emails. And that's the two main methods of communication with your loan servicer. And if you register, which you'll have to on your loan servicer's website, any mail that they send you will automatically be uploaded electronically through their portal as well. So if you get something suspicious in the mail, you can log into your portal and look to see if they sent you that mail. They actually scan it and upload it to your portal there. And so if you don't see it there, chances are it's a scam. We also get a lot of these scam phone calls. I know my iPhone says scam likely now. And so I just don't even answer those phone calls, but definitely something to be aware of. And then if you pay more than $600 in student loan interest per year, you can actually deduct it on your taxes for up to $2,500. That's super cool. It's something I've taken advantage of every single year. I know $600 sounds like a lot, but what will happen is, I don't know if you guys realize, but the university prepares a tax form for you every single year called the 1098-T. And you use that on your taxes to claim your student status. Well, your loan servicer will prepare a similar document called a 1098-E. And that is a form you can use on your tax return to claim the interest that you paid, and it can help you get a bigger refund in some cases, and it's definitely worth adding on your taxes. So that's a great tip as well. I think this is you, Taylor.
Yes, I could take it over from here. So, since we're at the end of the presentation, we have a challenge for you guys. You can either put $5 into savings once a month, or if you have student loans, add a section in your budget now to pay some of it off while the interest rates are at 0%, or you could do both if you're feeling really ambitious. Tackling the principal amount will definitely help out a lot during this time. And then we can move on to the next one. So at the Financial Wellness Center, we offer peer financial coaching. Just go to financialwellness.uoregon.edu to schedule a virtual appointment with one of the peer financial coaches. It could end up being me. You can talk to one of us about earning, spending, borrowing, protecting, saving and investing, and much more. An event we have coming up is a car buying workshop. That's next Tuesday, May 18th at 5 p.m. And then here are some workshops we'll have this month. As I mentioned, there's the car buying workshop. They'll go through the car buying process and outline the steps needed when buying a new car. And then on Tuesday, May 25th at 4 p.m., there will be a loan repayment workshop. We went over some of it in this presentation, but this workshop will probably go more into depth about it, and your parents can attend too if they really want to. And then these are the ways you guys can stay connected with us. Our website is financialwellness.uoregon.edu. Our email is financialwellness@uoregon.edu. Our social media is UO Wellness on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And then our YouTube channel is UO Financial Wellness, where you guys can access a bunch of our past workshops. And then make sure to check out our pages for upcoming events, financial tips, and past workshops that we've done. Thanks for letting me guys present to you guys. If you guys have any questions for either Kelly and I, we can try to answer them.